Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. The American Civil Liberties Union, D.C., is ramping up to take on President Trump over the flurry of executive orders that we've all seen this week. Meanwhile, federal workers are feeling a sense of uncertainty and wondering what and who could be next on the president's chopping block. The American Federation of Government Employees is trying to sort it all out for its workers. We have both the ACLU-DC and AFGE joining us tonight for the conversation. And by the way, this is just part one of a two-part conversation. On tomorrow, we will get a reaction from a member of the House and an advocacy organization. So stay tuned for that on tomorrow. My guests tonight are Monica Hopkins, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of D.C., and Eric Bunn, Sr., National Secretary Treasurer for the American Federation of Government Employees. Thank you both for joining the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Harold.
Let me start with the action targeting DEI workers. As you all know, they are all now on paid administrative leave, and termination is pending. Eric, do you know how many employees are impacted? And from your vantage point, is all of this legal?
Well, no, we don't know exactly how many employees will be impacted by this. That's one thing the administration right now is trying to find out, because some employees may not be categorized or sitting or within the particular department. It may be renamed something else. Okay, so we don't have a total idea of really how many employees will be impacted. We have been getting notices from our members who have been placed on administrative leave, but no, at this point. And the second part of your question was,
just from your vantage point, is it legal?
Legal. Maybe I need to defer to Ms. Hopkins on that point here. Okay.
Go ahead, Monica.
The point we have concern is about the fact that, giving them notice, putting them on administrative leave with the intent, at least we believe that, at some point in time, he's going to terminate these employees. If these are career employees, I think they would have to go through a RIF process for that. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be something they go out the door immediately. But with this administration, I don't know. Okay. We don't know how his plans are, okay, or how he plans to address this issue, okay. The legal aspect, they were hired to do a job, okay, all right, by the federal government, and it's not about performance or to discipline them for not being able to perform their job. It's a program where he wants to get rid of DEI, okay, and in that case, so there's other provisions on the personal manual of how he would have to go about doing that.
Mm-hmm. Your thoughts about the legality of this, Monica?
Yeah, I think, what Mr. Bunn is talking about is the protection of due process rights for federal workers who have been affected sort of by this paid leave that they have been, put on, and what is going to happen to them. So that's where sort of the ACLU would be concerned, and sort of the questions about legality is are those due process rights being protected for those federal workers?
So let's talk a little bit about this, because let's put aside, if possible, for the moment, the angst, the trepidation, and some of the emotional parts of this week for a lot of federal government workers. The reality is that we do know that if you are appointed by the president, it's time to go when a new administration comes in. This isn't a federal thing, but this can also refer to state government, a city, even a town. New administration comes in and that person wants their team. But my question is less about those who serve at the pleasure of the new administration and more about those, for example, who are in senior executive service. And I'll ask you about that, Eric, and certainly Monica, you can jump in as well. And also those who are the GS-14 and the GS-15s, those who are civil service workers, but they come up through the ranks, but they are not appointed. Are those people in senior executive service and the GS-14s and 15s just below them, Eric, should they be concerned?
Yes, they should.
Why do you say that?
Because the president, who we did it prior to him leaving last time, implemented Schedule F. Okay, and I think it would go below 14 to 15. It depends on what position you're in. Okay, if it's a position that deals with policies or procedures or something like that. But his whole thing is that if you're not loyal to him, he wants to expand it as far as reaching he can. Okay, all right. And if it deals with particular programs or initiatives that he wants to, and he feels that you're not part of his agenda or aligned with him, he wants to put you on Schedule F, okay, or what they call it now, Schedule PC or whatever, okay? We call it political corruption, all right? But, you know, it's all about being what's the proper word, okay? Aligned with him, okay? What his agenda is, okay? And if he has any sense of that the position that you're in, if it's going to go back to the agency, because the agencies now have to go back and identify these positions. Like I said, I think it's going to go past the SES and the 14th and 15th, okay? So, you know, at that point, again, we don't know how many employees this is going to impact, okay? I believe it will go below the 14s, okay? Because especially here within Washington, D.C., we have a lot of SES people. We have a lot of positions of 14 to 15 that will be potentially impacted by this, okay? Because you have to be allegiant to Donald Trump and his agenda.
Monica?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand why we have a civil service in this country, is because, you know, for most of the 19th century, the federal civil service operated on the spoils system. So whoever was the president sort of handed out political appointments and positions based on whether or not, you know, they were politically supported. And that didn't work because people weren't hired on competence or experience. And so
which century are you talking about now?
Well, as far back as 1883.
I ask again, which century are you talking about now?
Yeah. So you know, it's you are sort of laughing and nudging about like this is you know, could it be now? And this is exactly what we're talking about. So this is, instead of having a you know, merit-based job system that basically builds a backbone of government workers who are beholden to the Constitution and to doing their job, not the winds of political change and whoever is in power in the administration, which is what we have now. You know, it's sort of dragging us back a little bit into history and has serious ramifications for the running of our government. There are career civil servants who work in Social Security, and what's going to happen if people don't get their Social Security checks on time, right? Like it's one thing to say, oh, Schedule F and oh, government workers, but really understanding what workers do in the government to ensure that government runs and it runs on time and it affects all our lives independently. And for the ACLU in particular, this move really raises First Amendment concerns for us around speech, because federal workers are now afraid of, you know, saying anything or, you know, going against the Trump administration And it also raises freedom of association issues and due process issues. Many of the federal workers are in unions, and couldn't you just summarily like move them over? So all of these things are wrapped up in this, both SES and the what was Schedule F and now has been renamed in a new executive order.
Monica, can you give me kind of the Cliff Notes working definition of what Schedule F is for our listeners who may not fully understand what that's about?
Yeah, so essentially, it's sort of what Mr. Bunn exactly said. There is a category of civil servants that are currently protected from these political whims. And a new category would be created, which would be a category of F employees, and they would be moved over. That was the executive order that came out at the end of the Biden administration, or at the end of the last Trump administration, and was rescinded by President Biden. There is a new shaped one in this executive order that just came out regarding political the same political sort of move these civil servants into a class that would leave them sort of unprotected and at the whim of the president.
I guess, one of the other things, Eric and Monica spoke about this, about free speech. And this is where, certainly the First Amendment should be absolute. But as we know, in this political climate, that is not always the case. And I'm sure you all know, I know that some governments, and not just federal governments, but even state governments, they enthusiastically encourage their employees not to post anything on Facebook or social media that may be considered antagonistic to the current leadership position. And some state governments, as we know, for example, do not allow people to access social media in their state offices. Mm-hmm. So, as one of my friends used to say, Eric, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so do you think that, how do you balance that First Amendment and the reality of the politics right now?
That question to
you, Eric, yes.
Okay. To balance it, I mean, I agree with you. And some state governments, social media has been a tool we all been using, okay? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's misused. I mean, let's be clarified about that, okay? But to point that, we got to separate what is personal, what is work, mm-hmm. okay? My personal opinion is one thing, all right? As long as I'm not on the government's email and trashing my boss or whatever on the government thing, yes, the agency has a right to deal with me, okay, all right? If I'm on my own personal email and I'm part of a chat or whatever, you know what I mean, and I express we're going back to the point of freedom of speech, okay, mm-hmm. all right? So, that's the distinction between the two. I mean, and be truthfully honest, in a lot of industries, they are actually going here searching your Facebook page to see, your comments, even before they hire you, to see where you are. You understand what I'm saying? So they're using that as a tool against us, really, for one, having freedom of speech, in my opinion, about certain things. And clearly, I predict that this will be used with this administration, okay? Yeah. They will be monitoring your social media stuff here to see where you at on certain views. And if you got a government job, then I'm coming after you.
Hold that point, Eric. Don't forget what you're going to say. I do need to take just a brief break. Don't forget, you can hear this conversation in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about President Donald Trump's executive orders. My guests are Monica Hopkins, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of D.C., and Eric Bunn, Senior National Secretary Treasurer of the American Federation of Government Employees. Before the break, Eric, you were making a point about free speech versus the political climate and what people may do or say outside of work. Please make your point.
Well, the point I was trying to make is that we have a right of free speech.
Mm-hmm.
And the current climate we are with social media has been used against us. Okay. I'm talking about everyday American, and I'm just talking about a government worker. You know,
Mm-hmm.
okay. When it comes to hiring, if you make certain comments or your activities on pictures, whatever on Facebook or whatever social media has been utilized against employees, okay, or a person trying to get hired. And I believe that with this administration, you'll be even monitored even more, okay, to the fact that, your personal opinions about a position the administration is taking or whatever, and you're talking to your friends, they're going to be looking at those things, okay? And if you, in those positions we're talking about, the SESs and 13, 14s, and 15s, if you're not part of, the agenda, you lost all your political, not your political, but your rights on free speech, you'll be terminated, okay? All right, on the Schedule F, okay? It's dismantling the merit-based system, okay? That I should be able to have an opportunity to say what I feel, okay? All right? If you're not aligned with this administration, you out of here.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Monica, what is the plan for the ACLU DC and even the broader ACLU? Certainly you are connected with the national organization. Is there any recourse to fight back against these actions? What is your office doing right now?
Yeah, obviously, this raises the First Amendment concerns we've been talking about. And I just want to add also, Mr. Bunn is like nailing it about, the speech. And I really want to drive it home, which is it paves the way for an administration to use what people are saying on their social media accounts, but also looking at political donation records and things like that, other protected activity. And you also have to think about, these are workers who work in an office, right? Usually we have casual personal conversations with our colleagues and our workers, that are not work related. And so all of a sudden, it just shuts down speech. It shuts down people's associations that may be outside of work because they may have ramifications within their workplace, and that all those are unconstitutional reasons to fire government workers. And so we are watching this very closely. We have raised these First Amendment concerns. We know that the unions are deeply involved. These are they represent a large part of the workforce. And we are prepared to protect and defend First Amendment rights of federal workers.
Eric, I want to talk about union versus right to work, where DC is and has always been a very strong union city. Virginia, for example, right to work. Is there a difference for federal government workers whether they just happen to work across the river in Virginia, for example, or any other state that is not a union state and maybe right to work as opposed to working in DC proper for the federal government?
Well, you have to separate the thing. Yes, Virginia is a right to work, but we have federal agencies there. Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
And by being federal agents, they fall under the federal jurisdiction, not the state. All right. So the right to work that would be with the carpenters or another type of discipline, it's a little different. They're still protected because they're protected under federal law, for the job. They're civil servants. They just happen to be placed in a city that's a state that's a right to work state. So it doesn't impact them, those government employees. Now there may be impact on the state employees, okay, but not the federal employees. Okay, so they are protected because they are federal employees, even though they're in the right to work state.
The one of the other things, and either one of you or both can, kind of address this, because now I want to kind of bring back the rhetoric, the emotional temperature, but also have people understand that, for example, there was the order that came down by the acting director of Health and Human Services, where all communications regarding health-related things from the CDC, NIH, FDA is put on hold. Now, for those who do not support the new administration, that's a big boogeyman. It's frightening that we're not getting any information. But isn't there some reality that every administration, and I'll start with you, Eric, that information may be put on hold, paused, while the new administration kind of gets itself together? What is the difference? Is that all just emotion right this week, and that people didn't know that before? Or do people really have a reason to feel concerned that they're not getting health information from the federal government, for example?
I've been in this for a little while, and I don't remember, and maybe Monica can fresh on that, but I don't remember when the administration came in and said, don't communicate with anybody. Okay. Yes, there's a transition that takes place. All right. And, we may deal with certain new objectives or policy, but we talking about health issues here that, if it's a pandemic that breaks out tomorrow, we're not going to communicate with the people because the administration says so. Okay. So I'm not aware where the government has come in and said, in change of administration, don't communicate at all until we're ready 30 days, 60 days, 90 days later. Okay. Or whenever we get our agenda in place. Okay. All right. There's an inherent responsibility for us to do these things. All right. There are certain things out there that need to be addressed that we need to notify the, John Q public, what our ideals and policies and procedures is one thing. Okay. But we're talking about health issues right now. Okay. At least the agencies that you mentioned. Okay. All right. And I'm just not aware, and I could be wrong. Okay. That where an administration came in and said, no, shut it down until we're ready to start talking to people. All right. Are you aware of any like Monica?
Yeah. No, I think, just for members of the public, when you have this transition and you don't really notice it, right? Like the government keeps working as the new administration comes in. They have, their cabinet appointees go through a process of confirmation. The agencies keep running until, new agency heads are put in place. That's why you have a civil service, right? So these things can keep running. So if something like a pandemic breaks out again, we've already gotten the communications. They know what to do. They are still in place because in that transition, administrations sort of pick agency heads who will carry out the policies of the administration, the direction of the administration for the government, where it's applicable. And so it is troubling that all communication in those agencies, those very important agencies, has been shut off, that have real implications about public health and issues that the American public should be concerned about.
I do want to go back to the DEI question, Eric, and more broadly, I hate to use the word threat, but what this executive order about possibly replacing a slew of federal government workers may mean. So let's just call a thing a thing. When we talk about DEI, we are mostly talking about people of color and equity and on the job. But a lot of the people who hold these positions are, they are Black people. Yeah, there are some brown people, and there are some women and Black women. And so, what message, first of all, do you believe this sends? Even though the president said during his inauguration address that he was not going to forget the support that he got from Black people and other people of color. So, what does it mean? What do you believe it means? And secondly, not only the DEI people, but the other people who could lose their jobs. We are talking federal government workers, and particularly here in the DMV. It's a whole bunch of folks. What are they going to do if they lose their jobs?
Well, I'm glad you made the distinction, because in the beginning, DEI is different from, example, the Schedule F. Okay.
Exactly.
The ones who are being impacted by the DEI, let's call it what it is. It's about a program to make sure we got diversity within our workforce. Okay, it deals with our veterans. When they come back, yes, it's a segment or people you say as far as people of color who have these positions, but it's trying to make some equity within the agency itself. Okay, all right. So, the ones who have been put on administrative leave at this point, and whatever process they're going to deal with, I don't think, as I said, they're still civil servants. They got a position. They have a position within the government, and they have due process rights. Okay. It's just that we're making them taking this program or this department, and we're eliminating this department. So, until this administration plans on how they're going to plan to address them, would they walk out the door tomorrow, be terminated? But then we got another whole problem. Okay. Or do we have to have a RIF take place, and it's impacting another employee within the agency for wherever they came from, they're going in? That's another whole problem. Okay. Now, so, and to the broader point you're making is that the fact that, yes, there's a threat. There's been a threat in his when his campaign. Okay, it's really reshaping, redefining what the federal government is going to be. Okay, as Monica, a civil servant based, not a civil servant. We're based on allegiance to a man. Okay, or an idea. Okay, or a vision. All right, so yes, our members are worried. Okay, because they can have a job tomorrow, and the program changes, and all of a sudden there's a massive disruption in how we do business, how we do our policies, how we do our procedures, how they impact the everyday government. Okay, all right. And as Monica said, we're civil servants. We took an oath. We took an oath to protect and do our damn job. You understand me? Okay. Without any political ramifications with it, I got hired on my merit if I'm able to do the job, and that's what I do. We get paid less than the private sector to do these jobs. Okay. It ain't about pay. It's about we're government servants. Okay. And now the game has changed that you're not a government servant, you're a political servant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your thoughts about that, Monica?
Yeah. I mean, you said, how could this affect DC? And, there are over 3 million federal workers across the United States, and about 15% of those live in DC. And so ramifications on a federal workforce have huge ramifications on DC. I heard once someone say, DC is like Detroit. It's an industry town. Our industry is government. Right?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, when we're thinking about whole swaths of federal workers being relieved of their jobs, we're thinking like Detroit when they lost, auto plants. And so when we're thinking about the DEI stuff, we're thinking about the federal workers, but also, another executive order also revoked long-standing actions, including those addressing environmental justice, non-discriminatory hiring practices by federal contractors, Their DEI, I said earlier, is woven through a bunch of federal grants and the administration of those grants by federal workers, to ensure that programs sort of address these things, not only within the federal government, but also pay attention to them outside of the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing another piece of the threat that this administration had during the campaign is to move these jobs out of this area to Kansas City or whatever city, okay? And even put some of the things back into block grants for the state to handle, okay? So that's another threat there, all right? As you said, it's only about 15% of us here. Majority of them don't work in the Washington, D.C. area, okay, all right? But again, I said dismantling the face, how the federal government is looked upon, okay, by this administration. You shipped out, he did it the previous administration, and Biden brought their group back to Washington, D.C. Okay, all right. That's another threat out there. Okay, do I follow that job out there to St. Louis or Kansas City or Denver or whatever, or do I stay here? It's put our members, and not just our members, everybody. Okay, it's crazy.
So, which brings me to my next question, Eric. How would you describe morale this week?
Morale, I would say is low because we don't know what's happening. Every day is something different. Okay, we heard what his political agenda was when he campaigned, but how he implemented is a different story. Okay, all right, you know what I mean. So morale is like we're waiting to see what's the next thing is going to happen. Okay, all right, and you're trying to protect yourself in any way you can, financially, with your family, whatever, in case of a direction that may impact your job. Okay, so morale is a wait to see what's going on. All right, yes, we along with ACLU have dealt with legal challenges with the administration of some of the things that they're trying to do, but that's going to take some time for that to go through its process. Okay, all right. So morale is not high right now. Okay, yes, we got a new administration, this address administration, and one thing we're really concerned about. We're asking to sit down with this administration. Yes, there is waste in government. Let's sit down and discuss those things. Okay, all right. We know it better. We do the work. Okay, but you're not outside looking in. Okay, we do the work. What happens in the Defense Department? Okay, when you're spending $25 for a hamburger, for a hammer. You understand? So yes, there is wasted, but we're willing to sit down and work with this administration to find out how we can cut waste. You understand what I'm saying? But we haven't got that invitation. Okay, everything is being imposed on us. Okay, that we're in a position like this. Yeah, we're fighting for our rights.
Speaking of not knowing what's next, we do know about this.
Securing the southern border and deporting illegal immigrants from this country. President Trump is sending a very strong message to people around this world. If you are thinking about breaking the laws of the United States of America, you will be returned home, you will be arrested, you will be prosecuted. Do not come.
That was Caroline Leavitt yesterday, the new White House spokesperson, the press secretary, speaking to reporters just outside of the White House. As Eric just said, Monica, the president during the campaign, he said what he said. We knew that this was going to happen. He is already sending an additional 1,000 active military members to the border to address deportation. What concerns you about how this deportation, undocumented immigrant issue is being handled this week and how it's moving?
Yeah, I think sort of thinking about the immigrants' rights sort of executive orders that Trump has put in place, there are sort of three different categories that we're thinking about. So there are the mass deportations that he has been talking about, and the rapid fire that he wants to do them with. And we just filed a lawsuit yesterday against the Trump administration for violating the due process rights of immigrants by saying they are going to rapidly deport people. When you're in this country, you have certain rights, regardless of your nationality. Then we also think about the birthright citizenship, that on day one, he said he was ending birthright citizenship, which is enshrined in our Constitution. And when people think about birthright citizenship, which is like a word, it's a theory to a lot of people. What we're talking about in real life are currently having, families who are about to give birth to children who essentially would be stateless if they did not have citizenship. They're born in this country. Children who are born in the United States are US citizens. And then we think about asylum seekers. And in an unprecedented move, the Trump administration shut down CPB-1, which is the application app where asylum seekers can go to get an appointment at a legal point of entry to present themselves and seek asylum in our country. And essentially, not only did the Trump administration shut that down, they eviscerated all of the existing appointments. And this was actually a lawsuit that the ACLU-DC and the ACLU filed against the Biden administration, requiring people to get these appointments and show up at a legal point of entry when they used to be able to just present themselves at the border, say, I'm here to seek asylum, and go through the process. And so we have actually asked for emergency briefing from the court to move that case along, because at no time in our country have we just absolutely shut ourselves down to individuals who are fleeing their country for one reason or another, and coming to the United States seeking asylum.
Let me talk about first birthright citizenship. And I'm going to ask you to look into your ACLU crystal ball, because I know that you have one. But on its face, and I'm no lawyer, nor am I a constitutional expert, but even when I remember learning civics in 8th grade, and that was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but we knew, I didn't remember that it was the 14th Amendment, but I did know at that time that if you were born in the United States, it doesn't matter where your folks came from, that you were a citizen, and that could not be taken away from you. So, is that really going to fly? I mean, should people who have been born in this country, who are the children of immigrants, legal or otherwise, should they really be concerned about that, the 14th Amendment being usurped?
I mean, we're with you. It's, mind-boggling that this would even be a question, to say, oh, a child born in the United States shouldn't have United States citizenship. And that's actually why on day one, the ACLU filed litigation in this case, is because we want to make it clear that this is unconstitutional. And the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship is enshrined in our Constitution for a reason.
Yeah, but it just seems to me that and some would say maybe this is a new day. Some would argue that, but I just find that to be, and again, I'm not a legal scholar, certainly, I don't see that happening, but stranger things have happened. And I think that also I've been doing this, like Eric said, I've been doing this for a while, and there's certain things that, that have surprised us all.
I think, you're absolutely right. It's one of those, well, not surprised at this, and the looming threats are real. But so is our power and our resilience. We have been through this administration once. We have seen sort of the wild sort of claims that have been made, the attempts that have been made. In the last administration, the ACLU was in court 432 times against the Trump administration. We are more prepared than we have ever been to, provide resources to communities who are sort of in fear right now, immigrant communities. And so, the ACLU DC has on our website an immigrants' rights and resources hub where people can go to find information. And we stand prepared to protect DC and its residents and immigrants.
Mm-hmm. We lost Eric earlier, and he's back now just in time for me to allow him to have a final word about where we are as it relates to executive orders and the constituency that he represents. Eric, your final thoughts.
Well, I'm sorry. I did break off for a second, technical problem, but I really wanted to get on the issue regarding and I'm assuming Monica spoke to it.
Sure. Go ahead. I've got about a minute, so please go right ahead.
I'll close up. I will first thank you for allowing me to be here.
Sure thing. Thank you for coming.
Right. And the fact that working along with the ACLU and other entities, we are out here to protect our members, their rights. All right. We know there's a new administration, a new agenda. We're willing to work with this administration. However, we're not going to stand around and just let you knock us down without us saying something. We're going to stand up and fight for our members, to make sure their rights are being protected. And we will do everything we can to protect our members with this new administration.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to end this conversation. I want to thank again both of you, Monica Hopkins. Always good to have you on the program, Monica. I really appreciate your intellect and your insight. Eric Bunn Sr. also, thank you so much for participating, and we will continue to watch. And remember, tomorrow we will have part 2 of this conversation with reaction from a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.